Hey there. I am compelled, almost compelled, strangely, to go over this here. This is sort of like what this video is going to be about today. Exodus. The second book of Moses. Exodus. All right. What Exodus is it's a story about how the Israelites, not the Israelites, the Jews, I suppose. Well, maybe they do call them Israelites in here, I suppose. There's a big chunk of this that's lineage and tribal definition and all that kind of stuff. And it is the story of how the Jews left Egypt, so to speak. It is a story about the Jews leaving Egypt. So, it's also the story of Moses himself. You know, how Moses was a guy on the earth and all. All right, so it's the real truth here. You know, I'm not going to read you the story. I'm not going to preach out of it. I'm not going to draw some kind of, I'm not going to go through the real steps. I'm just going to rely on you to already know what the story is about. And from that, you have, it wasn't really a let my people go kind of a thing, as more of a take your people and leave kind of reality. See? That's the real truth of it. See, you gotta really understand what was upon the Pharaoh of Egypt at the time. See, not unlike today, in a lot of ways. The Pharaoh was experiencing not so much a slave crisis, but a refugee crisis. You see, the Sahara was putting pressure upon the tribal nomads as it was expanding rapidly in this period of time, because things were a lot wetter in that region than they are now, that's for sure. And this was the kind of like how there was a stress upon the ability of the nomads to actually make a living on the land. So they became refugees and they flooded into the valley, basically. And they put a lot of stress upon Pharaoh and the Egyptian cities that he was dealing with at the time, like in Cairo and all that kind of thing. See, they weren't slaves. It wasn't a slave problem that he was dealing with. He's truly dealing with a refugee problem. And so to solve it, he began to notice that I suppose it was his cousin or something, some relative of his that he had in what was the royal house at the time, his royal house. And this was the guy Moses. And because he noticed that, see, I really do contend that Moses was somewhat insane to begin with at this point here. Because I don't believe that he would have maintained his identity as a Jew and be incorporated into the royal household. I just don't think that would have really have happened. And if it did, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. But I really do believe that Moses was insane here. And because the insane, I mean, people who kind of have this sort of like the insanity of schizophrenia upon them. You know how they'll yell and talk to people that aren't there, kind of thing. Moses, I believe, was probably doing a lot of that. And people started following him around because these nomadics, they believed that the insane were prophets or something like that. And so he was getting a following wherever he went. And it was not only that, but it was really good entertainment, because here is a member of the royal house who's just completely off his wits, and just, we would have followed that around today even, so, through the gossip magazines and all that kind of thing. So, people aren't that much different now than they were then either. So you can count on it that they start following him around. He probably was quite entertaining. And then so Pharaoh gets the idea, well, now I can use Moses to solve this refugee problem. I can have Moses, I can convince these refugees that they are a chosen people and that Moses is their new God and he shall take them to their promised land. And in that way, really solve a problem. And now he gets rid of another problem in his own royal house. So I believe that that's really how it went. It was more like, the trials and tribulations, or whatever it was that came upon Pharaoh. The frog and the frogs falling from the sky, or what is it, the hail that was on fire, whatever the Charlton Heston version of this story was on the TV. Oh God, you ever see that Charlton Heston, the movie, that Charlton Heston movie? It's Easter's coming up soon, so I think the network's going to be putting it on. But my God, every line in that movie, for the exception of the gangster guy, the actor that really played a lot of the gangsters, and he plays kind of a hustler. The same kind of hustler character, organized crime figure in this one too. The story of that. If you see the movie, you'll know exactly who I am. Now that's the only real acting going on in that movie. Everything else is said like it's a damn proclamation out of the Bible, and it's just a hilarious freaking thing. It really is. And but the truth of this Exodus, though, it wasn't a let my people go. It was Moses, take your people and leave. And that's why Pharaoh dispatched the army. It wasn't to bring them back. It was to make sure they kept going. But this now is where things get a little religious, And that's when they are camped out in their place down over there by Sinai, the Mount Sinai thing, and Moses goes and walks up on it and all that kind of stuff. I really do know for sure that in that is a true moment, and it really did happen, that God, the true God of creation, tried to make a connection to this guy Moses, But the trouble, though, is as God took a portion of his free will from himself and crafted it into you, the unique individual being you are, as he's held you at the center of the universe in that private moment, and then to set you on the earth to then become to experience the craft of individuality, he is still connected to you in that kind of way of will, as it's his will over yours. So for you to then become aware of him and know that it is him, as Moses did when he was on the mountain, it would become not only his voice in your ears, but it would, your own internal voice of your own mind would then become that voice. See? And that's what Moses dealt with when he was on the mountain. It wasn't just the fact that the voice was coming from the bush that filled his ears. It was the fact that it was his own internal voice of his own mind, his own consciousness, that became that voice. And that's what broke him of his individuality. And from then on, this was a damaged commodity, you might say. This was someone who was, in a very real way, irreparably harmed by a contact with God. See? Moses lost his true sense of individuality, and he, for what I would know to be genuinely true, he is still upon the plane of death. God holds him there so that those that seek him shall find him and know the truth of him, that he is a broken person. And it might also be how God may hold something to himself in that way, to then understand that even maybe as a way to define a limit for himself in that private kind of way. So the real truth is, it was not a, let my people go thing. It was a take your people and leave. And if you really consider the truth of what they were, they're wandering around out there in the they get up around Syria and they start complaining, because, the propaganda said if we went with you, it would be heaven. Manna would fall from the sky. And where the hell are we? So they kind of plopped down a encampment, and they had the tablets with them that were in the box, that then became the relics. And they built a city and stuff, and they lived in that area, in that, chunk of land for a while. And they created this, I guess it was a city, and there was a temple in it and all that kind of stuff. And it was where their covenant, their Ark of the Covenant, was contained. And in the covenant was I suspect, the broken bits of the tablets. So, in antiquity, being the priests that they were, because now they're priests, see, now this is the actual established religion, and they move forward in time a little bit, and they become priests, these people. They have their priests, their society, and all that kind of stuff, and then they decide, well, let's put those tablets back together and see what's on them. And what was on them was probably written in Egyptian hieroglyphics. Because if you really consider the truth of Moses, as a child, being raised in Egypt, I think that's all he would have known how to write. See? And as he was the only one that could read or write among them, going up on that mountain, God either had to craft the tablets in the language he could understand, or Moses had to craft the tablets. But in either way, it was not a divine language. It was not like the finger of God. It was, Egyptian hieroglyph. And so they had no choice, really, because what it did was it kind of pushed them into the idea that the very foundation of their religion was a fraud. So it kind of pushed them to where they collaborated with their enemies to ensure the destruction of the relics for all time, so that such a fraud could never be exposed. And when you find Moses upon the plain of death as God holds him there, you will see that he is insane. Now, the real truth of it all is that the Jews are not exclusively the chosen people. Everyone is the chosen, because God chose to take a portion of himself, his free will. At the moment of time before time, best way I can say it, the cloud of free will came together and formed itself an identity, that of a divine being. And as an expression of his comprehension of his identity, he then becomes a creator God to build a society of unique individuals equal to him in his divinity that he may then live among. And that is the purpose of existence, our existence. And that is why it is his will over ours, and that is why there is a process of creation, of unique individuality. And so it is all of us, all of you all, that are his chosen, because he chose to take a portion of his free will from himself to then craft a unique soul with it and put it through a process to make it divinely equal. See? So, all of us, all of you all, are his chosen. That's the real divine truth. So with that, we'll see you next time.